Hello everybody. I know this is kind of sudden and probably a weird video for me to show everybody in I think it's been 2 months. But I just wanted to do a video like this. I figured it'd be fun and I kind of been thinking about doing it. This is actually the third take. I did my first take of this video 4 days ago. So it's been something I've been trying to get in the making, but it's kind of turned out bad both times I did it. It was like an hour long the first time I did this, and it was 43 minutes this last take, and I don't want it that long, so I'm just going to try to get into this and get to my main points instead of rambling off like I have been in the first two takes. But essentially, this is a tier maker list, and it's about the video game consoles of, just video game consoles, but there's also handhelds in it. I put all these here in non-applicable because I really just want to focus on the four titans, which is Sega, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. And so we're gonna rate them like this. S is the best. I fully advise anybody to get a console in this category and just try to play games on it, or find whatever game you can that's good on it and play those games. A, kind of the same thing as S, but I mean, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to, but good consoles as well. B is a meh. It's an okay tier. There's no hit or misses really. It's just kind of in between. C is I don't see the point in getting them, but other people would probably enjoy them, and other people would. It would be, C is kind of more of a thing I would use for what other people would want to play, or what other people would probably have more enjoyment out of it than me. And then D is just straight up trash. There's no reason to even get these consoles. These consoles should not even be bothered to be bought, or even looked at. But we'll go ahead and start it off with our first trash. Virtual Boy. It was a pretty bad Nintendo console. It only had a few games exclusive, or for us here in America, there's only, I think, 20 games. And that thing can cause eye strain and a bunch of other things if played longer than 2 hours. And the only colors on any game for that thing, think Game Boy, where it had only green, but this is red and black. So yeah, trash. NES. I would say B. It's an okay system. There's better ways of playing NES games, but if you were to just straight up just want to start with an NES, it's good. There's good quality games on it. Pricing's not too bad. Majority of the good games actually don't cost a whole lot. A majority of games that anybody would want to get an NES for, they would cost maybe $20 to $40. And some of them really good ones, I think New Super Mario Bros. Is only $10. Don't quote me on that, but I think what I'm getting here is that there's a lot of good games that are really cheap on that system too. The only problem I would say anybody would have with finding one is finding a good working one, and finding games that aren't broken, or that don't have really bad wear and tear. Because, I mean, it's been 40 years? 35 years? So, but it is what it is. Next, DS. B. The DS really has a bunch of games, but looking back on it, a lot of games don't really hold up, I feel like. And the majority of the games were just based off of gimmicks for the DS. So there's not really a whole lot of hardcore games. There are some, but there's not a whole lot. They're all gimmick based. And a lot of games that came out on the DS were cross-plat with a lot of other, not cross-plat online, but cross-platform, meaning there was other versions on home consoles. I almost said Homer consoles. But DS would be, I would just get a DS just to play games that were really made for the DS, and by that I mean games that were conceived as a DS-esque game, like New Super Mario Bros., Mario Kart DS, Pokemon. I think there was one game from a Contact, although that one's kind of expensive. But like and Resident Evil, Deadly Silence, those are all pretty neat games, and they're all built around DS. So I would definitely recommend those ones. But it's an okay system. Sega Master System, I would say it's a meh. I don't see any point in getting one. Actually, no. I'm going to go ahead and say C. I don't see the point in getting one, and I feel like that they really aren't necessary to get, because you could get a Sega Genesis and play every Master System game on the Genesis instead, and the library for the Genesis, or the Master System, isn't even that big really either. And I feel like a good portion of those games on the Master System don't hold up well to this day, so that's just my standpoint on it. The Switch, S tier. It essentially is like a portable home console with 2 controllers in it at all times. And it could have been the Nintendo's greatest legacy console, but they're fumbling the bag. They have an opportunity still to fix this, but in the foreseeable future, I don't see it happening within the next 3 years. So I want to say they fumbled the bag. But it is still relatively a good console, and there's really fun games that are exclusive to this system only. And there's also like console exclusive ways of playing certain games on the Switch that are really good. Like Towerfall, you can play like 6 people, and there's just a lot of good games on the Switch. So S tier for me. I would say it's pretty worthwhile of getting. Xbox 360, I want to say it's a meh. I grew up with Xbox 360. Ooh. Should I put it in front of NES, or should I leave it in between? I'll leave it in between. I don't think the DS is really worth getting as much, but I think the NES has some worth over Xbox 360. Xbox 360 is a meh. I grew up with it. There's a lot of games you could play on it, and there's a lot of good games on the 360. And you can play Xbox games as well on it. But I feel like the Xbox One does it better. But the problem also is that you can play a lot of games from the Xbox 360 era and Xbox One era on PC. So that's kind of my deal with it. I feel like 3DS, A tier. It is a more hardcore DS, meaning like, okay, DS was gimmicky just like the Wii. It just made games based off its gimmick, which was a touchscreen. But the 3DS kind of took away the gimmick and focused more on gameplay and focusing more on the game and how serious it can be. Game Boy Advance, honestly, S tier. And I think I would even put that in front of the Switch, because like Game Boy Advance is not really that expensive, but there's a lot of good games for the Game Boy Advance, and it can play literally every single Game Boy game ever conceived. So Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games work on it. Depending on which model you get. But like, there are a lot of good games for the Game Boy Advance alone. You don't even need to have Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. There's just a lot of good games for the Game Boy Advance on its own. And it's just like one of the best handhelds that's ever been released. I know that the most sold handheld is the DS, but in terms of quality, I think the Game Boy Advance really is one of the better handhelds ever made. Well, I don't know if it's we can technically say it beat the PSP, because PSP, they don't actually know the total number count of how many sold, but they both sold around the same amount. And I would argue that the Game Boy Advance has just better games, hands down, compared to the PSP. PS2, let's say S tier, but I wouldn't say it's a high S tier, because there are a lot of good games for PS2 that if you just got a PS2 alone and never got any of the other systems, like other PlayStation systems, you'd be just fine. Like, there's nothing on the PS2 that isn't worth playing. Final Fantasy 12 is a really good game. Kingdom Hearts, any of the Kingdom Hearts that's on the PS2 is worth playing, except for Chain of Memories. I feel like Rechain didn't really hit like the other ones. Dark Cloud was an interesting game. You have Tekken. You could play Tekken from Tekken 1 all the way to Tekken 5 on PS2, because PS2 plays PlayStation 1 games as well. So that's like 4,000 games you could play on that damn system. Soul Calibur 1 to 3 can be played on that system, I think. I think Soul Calibur 1 was on PS1. I'm pretty sure, I think. Or it may have been just a Sega Dreamcast exclusive. But Well, you can play Soul Calibur 2 and 3 on it. So, I mean, you got a good portion of fighting games on the PS2. You got racing sims. There's a lot of genres that are covered on the PS2. Even old arcade, games like Namco, Taito, and Midway and Capcom. I think Capcom did have an arcade release, re-release of games on the PS2. So, yeah, hands down, PS2 has a lot. But I don't think, for me, the PS2 slaps quite as hard as the other two games. I would say actually the PS2 is probably higher than. I mean, in terms of like game quality and like longevity of the system, obviously the PS2 and the Switch are bigger than the Game Boy Advance, so that's why I think I'm gonna put Game Boy Advance below these two. But I feel like the Switch could play the same games the PS2 can, but in more like handheld way, like you can take it with you. So I think that's how I'm going to leave this. Dreamcast. I want to put Dreamcast in front because there are so many unique games for the Dreamcast. But we'll put it like right here. That's an S tier console as well. A lot of good games for the Dreamcast. Jet Set Radio. Soul Calibur. Then you have Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which is arguably the best fighting game ever created. Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. You have, I think Super Monkey Ball came out for it as well. Nights into Dreams, Panzer Dragoon series. There are so many good games that came out on the Dreamcast. It was just a really good console. PS3, I'm going to put it in C. I never actually, out of all the PlayStation games, or out of all the PlayStation systems I've ever looked into, and all the ones that I ever wanted to even try playing, the PlayStation 3 never really interested me. It was probably because of the fact the majority of games I wanted to play on the PS3 ended up getting ported to the PS4, or you could play it on Steam anyways. And there's a few exclusives still on it to this day that I would want to play, but I never would bother trying to buy a PS3 just to play those two games. It just doesn't sound like it would work out. I just don't think it's worth my money to buy a damn system for like, I think $130 or how much it costs just to play two games. That's not worth it in my opinion. So, that's me. Genesis. A, because while I would say S, the Genesis to me, I feel like there's a lot of games that get re-released from that system to other consoles, and a good majority of the good games that are on the Genesis usually get re-released anyways. So I feel like if you got like any of these consoles, you could play Sega Genesis games on them, and you'd be just fine. But or no, it was on this one. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. Sega Genesis is A, just because of how many games are on it and how good quality they are, but I don't think it's S material to this day because there's just so many game consoles that even this thing has a virtual library where you can play games that came from this thing, and they're adding them every month. And exclusive games that used to only be on this are now on this too, so it's like, I mean, I don't know. I think it's A. But is it worse or better than the 3DS? I'm going to let my bias take over and say that 3DS is better. GameCube is obvious. I'm just going to say GameCube is the best. It will be the number one on this list once this list is all said and done. The GameCube has so many great games that are still unique and still hold up to this day that they have not re-released and that nobody has tried to copy. It's kind of insane, actually. Like, that was probably the best time in gaming was the GameCube. There was just so many good games that released on that thing. I could go on and list like 100 games off that system that were good, but that would take too much time, so I'm not even gonna bother. Sega Saturn, I think, is trash. To me, I don't feel like the Sega Saturn is worth investing in. I have seen a list of games that the Sega Saturn was compatible with. About, I think it was 80% of the games that were even released for that system were only in Japan. We only got like 128 games for it, and a lot of those games you could play on PlayStation. There was like a handful of games that was even worth getting on that thing. And I think that thing is still expensive to get to this day. So I am just saying I would not buy a Saturn just to play like Virtua Fighter or Fighters Mega Mix or Fighting Vipers or Burning Rangers. There's just no way. I think it's kind of trash. That was really the downfall of Sega too, really, was that system. Oh, Super Nintendo. I'm going to say that's A. And the only reason I want to put that in front of the 3DS and the Sega Genesis is because Secret of Mana is just so good to play, and that's a really fun fucking game. And that was actually the start of a lot of like series we have today that are mainstays, like Mario Kart started out on this. Star Fox started out on this. I would say it's a mainstay, but we haven't had a new Star Fox yet. Co-op Kirby started out on this as well, actually, too. So, there was a lot of good games that came out on NES, and I value the SNES more than I do the NES. So, A tier. PlayStation 1, I'm going to say B tier, and I will say that it's better than the DS, because the Resident Evil games on it were pretty fun. Silent Hill is still exclusive. The first one is the best way to play it is on the PS1, and that's probably the best game on that system because of how it like uses the technology or the hardware of the system itself to, you know, run the game in a specific way that it does, like to kind of emphasize the ambience and the just the feel of the game of Silent Hill. It was a good there were some good games on the PlayStation, and some of them are still on that, like, stuck on that console to this day. But I feel like, to me, the PS1 isn't worth getting as much because the PS2 can do everything the PS1 can, except for listening to CDs. I don't think the PS2 can listen to CDs, but it can, you know, watch movies. But I can say the same thing about Xbox 360 watching movies, but I don't think watching movies is, like, a huge, like, advantage. We're talking about games here, not like what can run like Netflix, Hulu, what can watch movies. So that's where my standpoint is on that. Game Gear, I think that's kind of trash too, because the Game Gear screens crack. They're easy to break apparently. Batteries go. You can eat a battery pack so easy, which is I think 4 AA's. It's either 2 or 4 AA's, and it only lasts for like 4 hours. So imagine you're playing like a big game like Shining Force Gaiden or like, what is that one game? There's like Vampire of Darkness or something. And you're not good at the game and you try to play it and you're like 4 hours in. You finally got to like a quarter of the checkpoint or like you're a quarter way through the game and then your like system dies. That's essentially like how bad it is. At least the Game Boy, you can get more out of it. You can play it for about, I don't know, I think it was 8 hours or 12 hours on one battery set. I'm going to say it's C, and I'm going to put it in front of all those because I feel like the Game Boy has more worth than the Master System and PlayStation 3 to me. There's just so many good games on the Game Boy you could play that would last you a long time, and even some that are replayable even. So, that's my standpoint on that. Wii U, C, it's going to be underneath all those. I don't see any point in getting them, but there is, to some merit, some worth in a Wii U. If you wanted to go a cheaper route of buying games that are on Switch, but you want to play the original version before the Switch, then yeah, go ahead, go get Wii U. But, I mean, I own one even, but the Wii U probably will never ever hold up quite as good as like any of these guys ever did. I think the Wii U will be fondly remembered as the game console that never should have. It never should have existed. There were some games on there that were good, that were never released, that broke the mold for Nintendo once again, like Splatoon. We got to see stuff like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild whenever it was nearing its end. We got to see like Smash Bros. That Smash Bros. On that console, by the way, was the best one because it had, at the time, it was, because it had a lot of DLC. which added the character roster to more third-party characters, which we had not seen prior, like before then. We had Snake and Sonic, but like that one gave us like Sonic, Pac-Man, Mega Man, Bayonetta, Shulk, Ryu, Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, the game that never released on Nintendo ever until like the Switch. So, yeah, I would say there are good games on the Wii U, but there's better games that were advanced onto the Switch, and almost every Wii U game has been ported to the Switch anyways. So, PSP, I'm going to put that in C tier. I will put that behind Wii U because I feel like there's even less reason to get a PSP than there is to get a Wii U, because a majority of PSP games came out either on Game Boy Advance, DS, or later on through remaster on PS4. And the only game that's really worth getting on there is Final Fantasy Duodecim, Dissidia, or Dissidia Final Fantasy Duodecim. And that's like a fighting game with Final Fantasy characters, and that's arguably the best game of the series because the other game that came out for the PS4 was not that good. So, one game. That's the only thing I would be interested in getting a PSP. Like I said, C tier, it's mainly other people's, it's different perspectives on different people's opinions, but for me, PSP just does not hold up. And I'm going to advance that with PS Vita and say that's trash. I don't know anybody that got a PS Vita that flaunted it and flexed with it, and really there wasn't a whole lot of exclusive games that were released on it. The only thing I think that caught people's eyes was Borderlands 2, but when you soon realized that when you play Borderlands 2, you had to use like the push pads that were behind it. But yeah, I think it's trash. I don't see any reason to get a PSP. At least for the PSP, it's cheaper to get, and there's actually good games on a PSP. On a PS Vita, there's like, what, 2 exclusives, and then how many games on those things would you rather play on the PlayStation 3 or PS4? I mean, really. So, PS Vita is trash in my opinion. Xbox, I'm going to put that in C, but I will put it ahead of everybody else because I think the Xbox has games that are unique still, but I would not say that that is the system that you would want to break the bank for, primarily because the exclusives that they do have on there wouldn't, I mean, there's a lot of games for Xbox, but there's a lot of games that aren't that good either. And Xbox, you just have to be a certain type of person to like Xbox, I guess, because some of those games just don't speak to me. Otogi, made by Sega, I still don't know anything about that game. I've looked at a couple of pictures, and I don't know. I have looked into it. It's like a hack and slash, but I don't know. Something about the way Xbox games look. They were like too gritty or something. I just didn't really get into them. Or they had like a weird like color scheme or something. There was something weird about Xbox back in the day, like old Xbox, that I just could never really get into. Xbox 360 is awesome. I like a lot of Xbox 360 stuff, but like original Xbox, there was like a weird, it was like a weird dark gritty thing going on, and that just kind of never appealed to me. PS4, I'm gonna say that is A tier, and I'll say it is above all those because I think, and I'm actually gonna do a double whammy on this one. That one does not go there. Those two are A's because I feel like majority of the games that came out on both of these you could play on PC and get a better like enjoyment out of the PC version. But I think the PS4 is better for me because I just like that controller. But Xbox One has really good backwards compatibility, and plus the Game Pass and all that stuff. But you can get 2 games for free for this one. I don't know. These both are really good. These are both really good games. Almost S tier, but I wouldn't think that they are S tier. Not quite for me, because majority of people nowadays right now have them anyways. But I feel like there's something about the games that are made on these that are kind of samey or something. I don't know. There's just something about these 2 consoles that don't feel like this quality for me, you know? Actually, no. I changed my mind. Yeah, we'll do that. I changed my mind. And I'll even put this right there. Just solely because of backwards compatibility. So, there we go. Wii is meh, and I'll do a double whammy as well. I believe this one can be right there. Actually, no, you know what? I'm going to put that one in front. Oh, right there. So, this one is essentially a better version of this one, and you already know the standpoint on that, so that's why I'm putting this one here. Wii, the reason I think it's a meh, even though that is the best system that they have ever released in terms of sale, I feel like that's the system that also killed Nintendo and its quality system, because I feel like a lot of games on Wii made really poor choices that to this day I've seen many questionable options. Like, there are so many games for the Wii that negated a classic controller use and replaced it with like motion controls, and I don't feel like that made any sense. I feel like Mario Galaxy can be played without motion controls. I feel like there is some way they could have made Mario Galaxy work without motion controls, and that would have been a better controlling game. But that's pretty much all I'm going to say on that, because I don't want to take too long. N64, I want to say it's B as well, but I kind of want to put it in front of the NES. There's a lot of exclusive games on the N64 that, well, I don't want to say exclusive. There's just a lot of good quality games on the N64, and I feel like that anybody that really wanted to look at old school gaming, like anybody that wanted to go anywhere between like 1999 or 1998, upwards, N64 is really good to start with, because even though the controller sucks, there was a lot of good games that released on that. So like Super Smash Bros., Pokemon Puzzle League, Quake 2, Doom 64. I don't know why people don't like Doom 64. I think Doom 64 looks interesting. Maybe I'll have to play it myself. But like, there's Duke Nukem also, Blast Corps, F-Zero X, which is obvious. Like, it's one of the better F-Zeros that they made. Star Fox 64, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Super Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, Diddy Kong Racing, Mario Golf, Mario Tennis. There was a lot of good games on the N64, and that's why I think it's higher meh. But I mean, if people don't want to get into it, I would also understand. Anyway, this is it. This is the whole tier list. Obviously, it's controversial. I'm sure a lot of people would probably put these two right here. And I'm sure a lot of people would put this guy up here somewhere. And I'm sure a lot of people, there are some out there that would probably put this guy up here. But that's not this list. This list is purely my own opinion. But I think it's universal when everybody can say that that has got to be the worst system that has ever been conceived of the four giants. And with that, I think I'm going to leave it, and I'll see y'all later.